What's going on, YouTube? Live on Instagram, too. Okay, so we're back. All you need to know about the music business. We're going to be reading chapter 3 on personal managers. And I have a sticky note for this one. And it talks about the 7 most important aspects of a personal manager's job. Personal manager is the single most important person in your professional life. A good personal manager can expand your career to its maximum potential, and a bad one can rocket you into oblivion. When the job is done properly, personal manager is the general manager and chief operating officer of your enterprise. There are, of course, some artists without managers, but they are very much the exception, and they usually have one or more other team members filling this role. Okay. The most important aspects of the manager's jobs are: one, helping you with major business decisions, such as deciding whether to do a record deal, and if so, which record company to sign with, deciding whether to make a publishing deal. We'll talk about what those are later. Figuring out how much to ask for, etc. Okay. Number 2, helping you with the creative process, such as deciding which songs to record, selecting a producer. We'll talk about producers later. Hiring band members, selecting photographers, etc. Okay. Number 3, promoting your career by managing social media, coordinating your marketing and publicity, and otherwise helping hyping you up to everyone the manager meets. Okay. Yep. That's facts. Number 4, assembling your professional team by introducing you to lawyers, business managers, and agents and overseeing those people's work. Yeah. Managers, they do like a lot of overseeing. Number 5, coordinating your concert tours by working with your agent to make the best deals with promoters, routing the tour, working with your business managers to develop a budget, assembling your road crew, supervising the tour personnel to make sure everything runs smoothly, etc. It's a lot of like work. We're not even done. Number 6, pounding your record company to maximize the advertising and marketing campaigns for your records, making sure your records are treated as priorities, screaming at the record company when they do wrong, praising them when they do right, etc. Yeah. That's very much the job. And then number 7, generally being a buffer between you and the outside world, such as fielding inquiries for commercial endorsements and personal appearances, responding to charitable requests, both for money and for your smiling face, taking the rap for tough decisions that you make but don't want anyone to think you did, etc. Okay. Let's take a look. Let's first take a look at the structure of your deal with the personal manager, and then we'll talk about picking one. Okay. So this is where we talk about the money. All of this. The manager. We just talked about the aspects of the manager's job, and how each one is important. That is a lot of work that I just read. That's not just one job. Like that's not just one set of tasks. That's so many different things that you have to maneuver and weave out. So how much does a manager get paid? Gotta get right. Talking about Instagram too. What's up, Instagram? Talking about personal managers. We just read the first 7 aspects of being a manager. What's going on? So we're talking about what the manager gets paid. So this section of the book is commission overview. Managers typically get from 15% to 20% of earnings from new artists. Established artists could sometimes knock them lower, and we'll discuss that in a minute. These percentages are generally applied to your gross earnings, meaning your earnings before deducting any expenses. That means, 1, if you're an individual artist, the fee is pretty much what it sounds like for songwriting, publishing, records, etc. We'll discuss some of the finer points later, but basically, if the manager's deal is 15%, they get 15% of what you take home. However, when it comes to touring, the 15% means much more than you might think. You'll learn when we discuss concert appearances on whatever page that is, because it may be different in some of your books, but for me, it's page 389, that you're lucky to take home 40 to 50% of your gross income. that means a manager's 15% of gross can take a big bite out of your net. Damn, so if you're taking home 40, you have to give your manager 15 of that off rip. I mean, for the amount of work the manager does, like, it's like, and it's not like you can pay him hourly. I mean, you could. Like, what kind of manager would do that? Okay, so he gives an example. For example, if you earn $100,000 and net $45,000, your manager gets 15% of gross, so it's $15,000. Since you're only taking home $45,000, the manager's 15% is 1/3 of your money. Not so good if you're the artist, though awesome if you're the manager. If you're a group and you have more than 5 members, 15% of gross equals almost the same as or more than any one of you earns, assuming you are dividing equally okay, wait, hold on. What? If you're a group and you have more than 5 members, 15% of gross equals almost the same as or more than any one of you earns. Okay, that's crazy. Assuming you're dividing equally, right? For example, if there are 7 of you, everybody gets 1/7. That's 14.28, which is less than the manager's 15%. In fact, since the manager's percentage comes off the top before you divide up any of the monies, you only get 1/7 of the 85% after the manager's 15%, which is 12.14%. And for touring monies, the manager's 15% of gross can be many times your individual share of net. That's crazy. Damn. Think about like all those K-pop groups, because artists have found it, shall we say, uncomfortable to pay managers more than the artist makes. The classic 15 to 20% of gross has softened over the last few years. Here's what's going down. Okay. Now here they talk about negotiating the manager's deal. Despite the powerful personality of many managers, carefully designed to keep you in your place, it is possible to negotiate with your manager. However, just like any other negotiation, the result depends on bargaining power. If you're a major artist bringing in $10 million plus per year, the managers will follow you like floppy-eared puppies, delighted to take whatever retreats you care. To drop a firm, right. On the other hand, if you're a brand new band negotiating with a powerful manager, you're the doggy. Here are the points to discuss. Okay. First thing to talk about is compensation. Okay. The first and most obvious issue is the manager's percentage. You should try to limit the percentage to 15%. Although some managers argue that the risk of taking on a new band is worth 20%, they say it will be years, if ever, before they ever get paid for a lot of the work, it is true. A compromise is to say the manager gets 20 up to a certain level and then 15% after that. The theory is that the manager gets a bigger percentage when you're young and the manager can't make as much, but his or her cut drops to the 15% norm when you're successful. This seems a bit weird at first because it looks like the manager has no incentive to make you more successful. The more success, the lower the managers take, but that's not really true. All managers would rather have 15% of a big number than 20% of a small one. Now that's actually not bad. 20% upfront now, and you have like 1,000 Spotify monthly listeners. And then next thing you know, you're at 500,000 monthly listeners. You get 10 million monthly listeners. Fuck it. Yeah. What you guys thinking? You guys think 15% is too much or too little? 20% too much? Just start a company at that point. Sometimes managers share in the net of an artist's earnings, meaning your earnings after deducting expenses rather than the gross. That is common in the UK, but not as much as in the US. This is way better for the artist. For starters, the manager won't get paid if the artist loses money, which is not the case in gross deals. In one deal I'm aware of, the manager got 20% of the net of a 4-piece band. Another deal paid the manager on the gross for records and publishing but on the net for touring. Okay. When a manager has a deal on the net, they will often ask for limits on the expenses. For example, artists who decide to go on the road and charter jets, throw parties in every city, put inflatable pools in their hotel suites, etc., can easily eat up the net while having a great time with their pals. Managers don't enjoy these parties quite much. Yeah, that's why they're like always on the phone and say, "Wow, what are you doing?" Yeah, managers don't enjoy these parties quite as much. Thus, the agreement might be that the manager is paid on net touring proceeds, right? But that the expenses of the tour can't exceed a negotiated percentage of the gross, or that the manager has the right to approve expenses, which I don't love as much, but you could often end up fighting with your manager about expenses. Right. A variation on this theme is that the manager gets a percentage of gross for touring, but the commission is capped at 50% of the artist's net. In other words, the manager will never make more than the artist. Okay, hold on. In other words, the manager will never make more than the artist that actually puts in his or her pocket. For example, if you gross if your gross is $1,000 and you have $800 in expenses, your net is $200. If the manager got 50% of the gross, he or she will earn $150. Under this arrangement, the maximum would be 50% of the net. 50. Okay, so 50% of $200 or $100. So the manager gets $100 and the artist gets $100. Note, however, that if you're a group, you all have to share the artist 50% of the net, which means the manager make more money than any one of you. Wow. In a few situations where the artist is a superstar, the manager sometimes gets 10% or less, and occasionally just a salary, no percentage. Okay. These salaries can run well into six or sometimes even seven figures. Okay, wow. Salary for a manager. You could also try to reduce the manager's commission for endorsement earnings, meaning money you get to like hyper product and for film and TV appearances. The argument is that you have to pay an agent to bring you these opportunities. More about agents in chapter 6, meaning you're paying two people for the same gig. Okay. If the manager will reduce their commission, you can sometimes get them to agree they'll only commission the amount left after you pay your agent for those deals. For example, if an agent brings you an endorsement deal for $100,000 and the agent charges 10%, the manager will get 15% of $90,000, $100,000 less than the agent's $10,000. Okay. If the manager agrees to this, they'll want to cap how much you can deduct for the agent, usually 10%. Exclusions. It's sometimes possible to reduce or even exclude certain types of earnings. For example, if you're a major songwriter who's hiring a manager to help you become a recording artist, the manager might get 50% of your earnings as an artist, but only 10% or even 7.5 or 5 or 0% of your songwriting monies. Okay, yeah. Or maybe the manager gets 15% of your songwriting monies from records on which you appear as an artist, and a reduced or no percentage on other songwriter earnings. Another example is an established motion picture actor who hires a manager to help him with his or her music career. In these cases, you normally exclude or reduce the percentage for the area where you're already established. If you exclude any of your earnings from commission, the manager won't be obligated to do any work in the excluded area, or they often do as a practical matter. Money losing tours. You can sometimes get a manager to agree that if a tour loses money, they'll take no commission from it. Okay, this is the same concept we discussed above when we talked about capping your manager's commissions at 50% of your touring profits. If you can't get your manager down to zero on money losing tours, then try for a reduced commission. Meaning, for example, instead of 15%, they only get 7.5% on a losing tour. And at the very least, get them to defer their commission until you're more successful. Meaning you agree they're entitled to a commission, but they have to wait and get paid later when you have money coming in. Okay. Another variation is that the manager doesn't get paid for dates when you make a small amount, such as $2,500 per night or a similar negotiated figure. Repayable monies. Sometimes you have to pay back money you got under a deal. For example, you may have to return money under some merchandising deals, as we'll discuss in chapter 24. In this case, ask the manager to repay their commission on monies you have to shell out. Deductions. Certain monies are customarily deducted certain monies are customarily deducted before computing the manager's percentage, even when a manager is paid on gross. Most managers don't take commission on these, even if their contract says they can, but some try. So it's good. So it's always a good idea to spell things out and avoid any misunderstandings. Here are the list of no's. Okay. Here are the list of no's. Number one, recording costs. If the record company pays you money and you spend it on recording costs, you shouldn't pay a commission on those monies. This is because the funds only pass through your hands, i.e., you don't keep them. So there aren't really earnings. Number two, money's paid to a producer of your records. Producers are the people hired to put together your recording. And we'll discuss that in detail on whatever page that is for you. It's page 123 for me. And you pay them advances and royalties. Just like recording costs, monies you have to fork over to a producer aren't really earnings for the same reason we just discussed in connection to recording costs. Okay. Number three, co-writers. When you write songs for somebody else, the manager shouldn't get paid on another person's share of the song's earnings, even if you collect them first. Yes, I feel that. Number four, tour support. This money is paid by a record company to offset your losses from touring. Whether managers should commission tour support is a bit controversial, okay? Some managers argue that this is money you get from the record company, just like any other money, and they helped you to get it. So they should commission it. Most of the time, however, they'll agree it isn't commissionable because it only compensates you for a loss. Okay. Number five, cost of the collection. If you have to sue someone to get paid, the cost of suing them to collect money, that's called collection costs, okay? Yeah. They should be deducted before applying the manager's percentage. For example, if a concert promoter stiffs you for $50,000 and it costs you $10,000 in legal fees and the court costs to collect, okay, the manager shall only commission $40,000 of the $50,000 recovery, less the $10,000 collection cost. Okay, let's reread that. For example, if a concert promoter stiffs you for $50,000 and it costs you $10,000 in legal fees and court costs to collect, the manager shall only commission $40,000, the $50,000 recovery, less the $10,000 collection costs. Another way to look at this is to say the manager bears his or her proportionate share with the collection costs. Okay. Number six, sound and lights. It's common in personal appearance contracts for the artist to supply his or her own sound system and stage lighting. The promoter then rents the sound and lights from the artist for a specified dollar amount. Customarily, this rent money is considered an expense reimbursement as opposed to a fee paid to the artist. So the manager isn't paid on the amount allocated to sound and lights, but you gotta ask for this. But you gotta ask for in this one. Okay. Number seven, open acts. When you get to the superstar category, your deal is for a personal appearance. It may also include monies you pay to an opening act. Again, since this money just passes through your hands, it shouldn't be commissionable. Number eight, related entities. More and more often, managers now own record labels that sometimes publishing companies, film production companies, concert promotion businesses, or even festivals. If you make a deal with a company owned by the manager, you'll definitely need independent legal advice because the manager won't exactly give you advice on how to squeeze them for the best deal. Also, you shouldn't pay a management commission on the earnings from that company. Managers don't always agree to this, arguing that they are wearing two hats. For example, manager and record label. Therefore, they should be paid for both. They also say if you had another record company, you'd be paying them the record company earnings. In response, you argue that they can't be expected to beat up their own company the way they would beat up a major label. You also argue that they're getting paid much more through that entity than they would as a manager, so they shouldn't double dip and get paid twice on the same earnings. They get paid once as a label when you sell those records, and then again as a manager when you get paid for those sales. Also, if you leave them as a manager, they'll still get paid as your record company if that deal continues, right? That's a lot. That's a whole lot. The term of the management agreement, meaning the period of time that the manager will work for you, is usually 3 years, though some managers try to get more. If you're an artist, you want to make it as short as possible. If you're a manager, you want to make it as long as possible. Historically, most managers tied the term of their deals to album cycles, meaning the time from when you start recording the album to the end of touring or promotion of that album. And a few managers, rarely say, still operate on that basis. However, the concept of an album is challenged in the streaming world because artists release more and more of their recordings and non-album bunches, both bigger and smaller than albums. And the recordings aren't always the same time, so the definition of an album cycle became problematic. You can fire your manager too, and they can still earn money after the term. So it's a part that says earning after the term, the gift that keeps on giving. The gift that keeps on giving. The gift that keeps on taking, actually. One of the most important points you have to negotiate is what your manager gets paid after the end of the management deal. Even though the term may be over in a few years, virtually every manager contract says the manager gets paid on earnings after the term. Those earnings are generated under contracts entered into or substantially negotiated during the term. This language means two things. Okay, what does it mean? One, as to records made during the term of the management deal, the manager gets commission from income earned by those records after the end of the management deal. And two, the manager is paid on records made after the term of your management deal if the records are recorded under a contract signed during the term. That's interesting. All this could mean, and I've seen it happen, that a manager is still getting paid 7, 10, or more years after he or she finished rendering services. Wow. For example, suppose 6 months before the end of the management deal, you sign a 5-album deal. Under this clause, the manager gets paid forever on the sales of those 5 albums. Wow. Most of which will be recorded after you part of the company. Wow, that's crazy. The major thing to worry about records and publishing, unless you're in the television series, long-term product endorsement deal, or some other non-musical commitment that could run for several years. Records and publishing are the only areas where you're likely to have significant earnings from activities after the term under agreements made during that term. Other contracts you make during the term, such as personal appearance engagements, may be completed after the term, but this happens in a relatively short period, although it can represent millions of dollars. And if a manager is involved in setting up a tour, it's not unreasonable for him or her to be paid for something for the tour, at least for dates happening within 6 to 12 months after the term. So if you're going to dump your manager, and I underlined this, so if you're going to dump your manager, do it before the tour gets set up. I underlined this. If you're going to dump the manager, do it before the tour gets set up. If you're going to dump your manager, do it before the tour gets set up, because they'll be getting paid still. All right, I'm gonna read this last part right here, these last 2 pages, and I'm gonna play Roblox for my little brother. Let's do it. So, picking the right manager. So, how do you pick a manager? First, review Chapter 2, which applies to picking everyone on your team. Then take a look at these specific tips. Okay, so let's see. Let's start with the absolute best To use a yardstick and measuring for your candidates. Okay. The absolute best is a powerful, well connected manager with one or more major clients who is widely enthusiastic about you and willing to commit the time required for your career. If you're a superstar, you can easily find such a person. If you're not, the situation hardly ever exists. That's because when a manager is most powerful and successful, he or she is usually not interested in anything other than a major money earning client. The manager's analysis is simple. It takes as much or more work to establish a new artist as it does to service an established artist. And guess which one pays better and sooner? Every once in a while, a powerful manager gets genuinely revved up over a new artist, but this is rare. You have to be extraordinarily lucky to even get this person's attention, right? So let's look at the more down to earth alternatives, and not any particular order. Okay. A major manager with a young associate who is genuinely enthusiastic about you. A mid-sized manager who is widely enthusiastic about you. A major, powerful manager who is taking you on as a favor, either a personal or a professional, to somebody who is very important to him or her. A young, inexperienced manager who is willing to kill for you. There are, of course, endless combinations of the above, but those are the major categories. Unless you can get the best possible situation described above, you have to make some type of compromise. The compromise is between power and clout on one hand and time and attention. The reason a manager is powerful is that he or she has at least one major client who takes up a lot of the manager time. This means you're going to get less of it and thus less personal attention, although these people can often do more in a 5 minute call than a newcomer can do in a week. At the other extreme, a young, bright manager with no other clients will lack clout and experience, but will spend all of his or her time working hours promoting your career. And between lies a rainbow of choices. I personally like young managers a lot if they're bright and motivated. I've seen their energy overcome the lack of experience and political clout with superb results. And to help you understand why, let me give you the Passman. Managers' careers go something like this. Okay, first, the manager is young and enthusiastic and attaches himself to a promising young act. By doing whatever it takes, the manager promotes the artist into major stardom, at which point A, every other manager tries to steal the artist, B, the manager is offered 27 other acts to manage, and C, one of the larger management companies tries to buy all or part of their company. 3, after a few years, the manager is exhausted from having worked so hard on the first act back when he or she had nothing else to do and could barely live with the artist. So the manager wants to cash in on the fame and fortune while it lasts, and accordingly starts hiring associates and taking on superstars. This is the point at which many managers begin to lose it because they're too successful. Some of them have such huge egos they won't take on associates of their own caliber for fear the associate might steal the artist. So they hire less capable people and give the artist lousy service. Other Others hire good people but pay them so poorly that their employees get frustrated and go out on their own, usually stealing the artist in the process. As things unravel, the managers begin to lose the artists, are no longer getting the personal attention they once did. After those batterings, the manager decides it was a mistake to have tried to get so big, breaks up with his or her partners, keeps one or two key artists, and starts a record label and goes into the music business. Damn, that is a lot. Of course, a few managers have been able to pull off large, successful management companies, but they're the exception. Although, also, most of these big companies are really just a collection of managers who essentially share expenses in some social services such as marketing, digital, etc. Meaning the managers are operating on their own for the most part. At any rate, every major manager was a nobody at one time. While I don't suggest that a superstar
take on an inexperienced manager, I do think many new artists are well advised to hire a bright, aggressive young manager. Obviously, you shouldn't do this if you have the opportunity to go with the sales manager who is or has someone in his or who is genuinely enthusiastic about shit. But if this isn't an option, the right young manager could be a real asset. Okay. That was chapter 3 on personal managers. Manager's job is a lot, man. Like that was a lot of information just there because they do literally so much. Like every single thing, like in the day to day, it's like they have to have themselves inserted into it. Do you think, as an artist, that you need a manager at this point? Because at this point in time, it's like he was like, "Oh, I need a manager to take me to the next level." But with the access to information and so much going on, it's like, at what point do you need a manager? And you just have to think about that when you get to that point. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, we're gonna pick up chapter 4 on the next stream. We're gonna talk about business managers. And that's just the person that handles your money. And yeah, I hope you enjoy it.